During this year's celebration of Women's History Month, Queens Public Library is celebrating the leadership, strength, and solidarity of women identifying individuals in all walks of life. Be inspired to unleash your power within and make your visions for the future a reality. For upcoming programs, book recommendations, and more, visit queenslib.org/WHM 2023. Tax season is here. Queens Public Library is partnering with a number of organizations to offer free in-person tax counseling sessions at several QPL locations. Visit our blog at queenslibrary.org for more information. QPL's mobile app now translates to over 90 languages. Check out all the services you can access using our mobile app and its latest features. It's available for both Apple iOS and Android. Download the QPL mobile app today at connect.queenslibrary.org.
Welcome to Queens Public Library's talk with artist Ruben Toledo, illustrator of Mary Lou Luther's new book, Bespoke, Revelations from the World's Most Important Fashion Designers. Ninez Notes writes, the book is a unique personal journey through the years using wonderful quotes from the best of the intriguing creators of the world of fashion. LookInside.com states, Bespoke is an excellent read whether you are a fashion novice or a seasoned fashion insider. Hi, I'm Brian Alessandro. I have written for Interview Magazine, Newsday, Pank, Huffington Post, Lambda Literary, and I have recently co-adapted Edmund White's A Boy's Own Story into a graphic novel for Top Shelf Productions. Additionally, I co-edited Fever Spores, The Queer Reclamation of William S. Burroughs, an anthology of essays and interviews about Burroughs for Rebel Satori Press. I'm also the co-founder and editor-in-chief of the literary journal, The New Engagement. My first novel, The Unmentionable Mon, was published in 2015 by Cairn Press, and my first feature film, Afghan Hound, was produced by Marriott Media in 2011. It's currently streaming on Plex, Tubi, and Amazon. My new novel, Performer Non Grata, will be released in April by Rebel Satori Press. Culture Connection, curated by Daniel Zaleski and now in its 10th year at the Queens Public Library, is proud to present international artists from emerging talent to award-winning masters. These disciplines include music, theater, author talks, and film. Now expanding into a virtual format, Culture Connection is currently reaching a global audience. Cuban-born artist Ruben Toledo has had his work published in The New Yorker, Vogue, Harper's Bazaar, Town & Country, and The New York Times. Together with his late wife, Isabel, their combined work has been the subject of various museum exhibitions worldwide. Additionally, Michelle Obama wore Isabel Toledo's lemongrass yellow wool and lace shift dress with matching overcoat for Barack Obama's first inauguration in January 2009. Thank you, Ruben, for joining us. Unfortunately, Mary Lou is unable to join us this evening, but we spoke beforehand, and I will be sharing answers to several of my questions. But thank you, Ruben, for being here.
My pleasure. We'll miss her.
Yes, we will miss her, but we will discuss her as well.
Big time.
So she'll be here in spirit, absolutely.
Big time.
Ruben, your book is really beautiful, and it reads almost like a history of 20th century fashion. I asked Mary Lou what inspired her to put it together, and this was her reply, quote, in my years of designer interviews, I created a file I labeled Designer Comments, a file I stumbled upon about 3.5 years ago when looking for something else. As I read those comments, I realized that there were meaningful words from meaningful designers, and that their voices deserved a hearing, a book of quotes. So I contacted my longtime friend, artist extraordinaire, Ruben Toledo, to see if he would have any interest in such a project. Fortunately, he said yes. Then I contacted another longtime friend, designer author Jeffrey Banks, and he introduced me to Rizzoli, the company that published several of his books. The talks led to a contract and ultimately to Bespoke. Now, Ruben, you've known Mary Lou for many years, and you've worked in fashion with Isabel, of course, for over 35 years. What can you tell us about Mary Lou's career and her impact on fashion?
Well, she's a fascinating woman. Just the idea that she comes from Nebraska, so middle of
Yeah,
America, a small town, and becomes one of the most important fashion journalists I think ever,
yeah,
um, is extraordinary. Her travel is extraordinary. Her journey there was incredible, and
yeah.
I wish she was here to tell you all the ups and downs and places, but. She goes from Nebraska to living in Los Angeles and covering fashion there in California for a long time for the LA Times, and of course hobnobbing with all the famous actors and actresses on top of the fashion layer. Added another slant to which is very American. The whole idea of pop culture and
Yes,
entertainment already meshed in, and this is still in the '60s, so she was
right.
way ahead of the pack there. And then moves to New York and continues her work. What I love about her is she's so straightforward. She's so sensible. She's
Mm,
so clear, um, that the way she reports on fashion is she gives you the meat and potatoes, I
yes.
should say, and still enjoys the dessert and the sweets and the smoke and mirrors.
That's good.
But she gives you what you need. You can't just live on smoke and mirrors and ice cream and cake, as delicious as it is. She really wants to feed you. And when she looks at her collection, she's looking with this very beautiful American common sense of like, why do I need this, and what is it that I need, and how will it change my life? How will it improve me? So I think that's her
100%.
uniqueness.
And also like a real dissection of craft, maybe, right?
Oh,
And
she
she
knows
really
that
cares about
like
the
a man.
mechanics of it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you have to. I think the aesthetic part and craft is almost like built into what we all do. If you
sure.
don't appreciate that, you're in the wrong world. And
Yeah,
and you
absolutely.
I think people who don't have that know right away to leave, because it's all based. That's like that is the one common denominator. You have to know craft and the aesthetics. The taste value and the craft and
Sure.
what it takes to make things. That's so important.
And probably like a sense of history too, to make sure that you're not necessarily repeating something that's already been done. There has to be a
History you
sense
do
of
learn.
originality, right? Yeah,
Yeah, history you learn, and if you're a creative person, you have a kind of an instinct for originality. There's
mhm,
nothing truly original because
right,
everything is built on everything else. But
sure,
you know that old saying, you can't reinvent the wheel,
right.
but you have to come at that wheel from your own angle, from your own perspective. You do have to discover your own wheel, right? And I
So
think anyone in this field instinctively knows when someone's an original, even if they're just making the wheel, like you've seen it a
sure,
thousand times. But
sure.
you know when
Reinvention,
it's a
right?
special thing
Reinvention.
that they put their
Yeah.
soul into.
I think it's so much of it too is about like just like what are you contributing, right? What is your vision? What is your voice? And how are you reinventing this wheel
It's
that we've all
essential. Not, culture. It's in itself is like a giant stew. It's like a giant soup, and
yes.
each one of us, each creator, brings your own unique ingredient that cannot be found anywhere else. And you bring that unique ingredient to melt into the big pot of culture, whether it's fashion or writing or choreography, whatever it is,
I
filmmaking.
agree.
You bring that unique thing that is only yours, that cannot be found anywhere else.
It's almost like a conversation really that we're having with contemporaries and also those who are our forebearers. It's one
Exactly right, and it's a like I said, it's a layering of ancient cities one over the other, but
I
you
love that.
take the best of the past and you keep going, or
I
sometimes
like
the worst.
yeah, sure. Hey, that's necessary too. And we should say that her career spans 7 decades, right?
That's what was so
That's
unique about
remarkable. Yeah.
when she told me about this book, I just fell over. First of all, I didn't realize it went back that far. I knew she was in it for a long time, but I didn't realize how far back she went and how many people she knew firsthand. Like she knew
Yeah.
Chanel, she knew
Yeah.
Dior, she knew Jacques Fat, she knew these legends,
It's amazing.
all the
Yeah.
way to the now, and she's still in it.
Yeah.
She's still in
Yeah.
the trenches. So to have that trajectory and that incredible landscape of history, like you said before, and to build on it is extraordinary. Not too many people can go there.
No, not at all. She said that she contacted you. So tell me a little bit about those early days when you first started collaborating on this project.
Well, first of all, when she called me to tell me what it was about, immediately. I said yes. I didn't have to think twice because it's I love Mary Lou. I love her vision, her work, her style, how she sees the world, how she observes, and just it was a treat for me to just be able to dive into her history and to her files of these incredible interviews she
Right.
has.
Right.
I mean, this could have been an encyclopedia. It could have been a
Yeah.
volume 1 to 1,000, right? This is
Yeah,
number one.
that's what I was thinking as I was reading it. I'm like, this could be
Completely.
a series, really.
Completely. And remember,
Yeah.
she's a good editor. So she just
Mhm.
edited down each quote to just sometimes just a sentence. Sometimes it's a small paragraph, but she really edited it down to the essential, right? But each one of those interviews is an incredible interview. Each one of the designers is, and then the people we had to unfortunately edit out because of space, you can only go so far. It was
Sure.
heartbreaking, but that's,
Well,
uh,
perhaps they could be saved for the second
I
installment, the
would think
second
so. Like I
volume.
said, it's an encyclopedia. I think Mary
Yeah.
Lou deserves her own encyclopedia.
Yeah. I asked her to this point, I asked her how she decided to approach the project, like which quotes she would include, which she would leave out. She said, quote, "My inclusivity depended on the designer's importance in the world of fashion and her or his ideas, provocations, and revelations."
Absolutely true. But like I said, we did have to edit out some that were so worthy also, but it was just a matter of
Sure.
space and then the logistics of making a book during the pandemic too. It was like it was a lot of back
So
and forth about that.
did you also illustrate the ones that were edited out as well before they were edited?
Sure,
Of
yeah, I did
course.
the drawings and everything. They were all done, and the quotes were selected, and they were gorgeous, and they were incredible designers who I don't want to share because I
Sure.
feel bad for them, and hopefully there is a volume two. But
How many how many would you say, Ruben, didn't make it? I'm just curious to know how many more there would have been.
off the top of my head, I guess there's about at least 10 or 15 more.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay,
and they
yeah.
were stunning, and
Okay.
they're all incredible designers that
Yeah,
the quotes are so
giants.
gorgeous and the designs are beautiful. That
How did you decide to visually interpret the quotes? So you were given the quotes and you knew who said them, and then how did you go from there? Because some of them are not, some of them do feel like they are caricatures or portraits of the designers, but others are just very sort of fantastical abstractions. So how did you decide how you would approach?
normally I don't. Normally, when people come to me, it's not that they want me to draw a specific design. There's a lot
Mhm.
of wonderful illustrators out there who are far better than I am at doing that. They come to me for my ideas or vision, right? And also when they don't really know what they want, that's when I'm at my best because I
Mm,
get to invent.
sure.
So in some cases, yes, the quotes that Mary Lou picked were very specific and descriptive, almost cinematic. You could see what needed to be done, and in other cases, they were more ethereal thoughts or
Mhm,
almost
mhm.
poetic, which I
Yes.
love that, and I
Yeah.
love interpreting or getting signals from a designer or a person, any person, and understanding them and understanding their world and trying to solidify that atmosphere called spirit into a shape.
Hmm. How long did the project take?
Luckily, we had a while because we had those a couple of pandemic breaks, so
Right.
that was a big blessing because there was no rush, and sometimes I had two or three or four variations for each designer just to be
Oh,
able to
that's
play.
interesting.
Because
Sure.
and then I have to give a shout out to our amazing art director Mark Ballard, who was incredible. He was the art director at Interview Magazine for ages. Worked with Andy very close
Yeah.
at the beginning, and for many years just an extraordinary eye and extraordinary taste and knowledge too of history of art and design architecture. He's an architect by training, so we had another layer of an incredible person on the scene. So he had the liberty also to see what worked best together, and as a good collaborators, none of us was holding tight the reins. Mary Lou would drive sometimes. Sometimes I stayed out of the driver's seat. Period. My job is just to draw. That's my delight. But then between the Rizzoli folks, Mark Ballard, the incredible art director, and Mary Lou, they kind of had to slug it out and give their point of view on what should live there and how it should live.
So are you saying that for every quote you submitted anywhere from like 2 to 4
Sometimes on
options?
some of them
Yeah.
it was on some of them it was a bullseye. Like I
Mhm.
thought this needs nothing more. But on others, Isabel was always my editor. She was a great editor. I'm a terrible editor. So luckily I work fast. So instead of debating with myself what idea is worth it, I start four of them at once or five and see who wins. That's my just go to races. Go to the races. I love the artwork. Go to the races.
I love that. I like that concept a lot. So let's give folks an idea of what we're talking about. Eve, if you could throw the slides up and we can start going through them. So of course, this is the cover. And this was the illustration that accompanies Ralph Rucci's quote, which is, quote, "I would like to bring back a rigor of cut and flow and complicated simplicity that doesn't look messy." Slide number 2, this accompanied Pierre Cardin. So how did you, let's go back. I mean, perhaps you could speak to each one of these just briefly. How did you all decide to go with the illustration that accompanied Ruchi's for the cover?
Well, I think that this one he also speaks about he speaks about how many pearls he used on a certain dress. I don't remember if he made it into the quote, but that's the thing that gripped me. That he used over, I don't know, over 100 or 200 teeny weeny little pearls in between each pleat to
Mm,
separate them. Of course, this is not what the dress looks like. He gives
right.
me, most of the designers give me liberty to just imagine. So my interpretation of that, so people would understand, is that I drew many pearls dissecting together pleats. The way he would
Right.
do it is you would never even see those pearls. They're just there to separate the teeny weeny pleats that you can't even see. And that's the measure of each pleat, which is incredible.
Okay.
But you need
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
how do we
Yeah.
show that? So my idea was just to blow it up and let people see how that what the technique is and what it is.
Love it so much. So beautiful. And then, of course, this is the one that accompanies Pierre Cardin's. The quote is, "The immensity of the universe and microscopy of the cell, computers and geometry. These are the sources of my inspiration. The garments I prefer, those I create for tomorrow's world." How did you decide on this particular image for Pierre Cardin's quote?
Well, I love Cardin's his whole idea that he goes from the minute, the cell, the cellular, what's in your
Mm,
body, the biology,
yes.
entire universe. So that really that's a big net he casts. But in
Yeah.
fact, that is how designers see from being married to a designer like Isabel.
True.
I
Yeah.
understand they're not just creating clothes; they're really envisioning each one of them is envisioning a universe. It's how we live, it's how we stand, how we sit, our body language, the furniture, the space we inhabit. Everything's connected by these sort of like invisible style threads to your whole universe. And
Mhm.
I love that he expressed that, and that really is. He was always such a futurist. He wanted to live in
Yeah.
a future
Yeah.
that's not here, but he made it
Yeah.
here. So I love
Uh,
that.
the marriage between science and art always really excites me.
Absolutely.
This is Yves Saint Laurent. The quote is, "I invented the modern woman. I invented her past. I offered her a future, and that will remain after my death. I wish I had invented blue jeans. They have expression, modesty, sex appeal, simplicity, all I hope for in my clothes. Without a doubt, my favorite design is Le Smoking, also known as the tuxedo. In 1966, I showed it with a transparent blouse and men's trousers, and since then, the tuxedo has been featured every year in my collections. When they ask me about elegance, I say, isn't elegance forgetting about what one is wearing?" So good.
Yeah, Yves is fantastic. We were lucky enough to know him as well, and Pierre
Mhm.
Berger. But he loved jeans. He loved the American. He loved the naturalness of Americans, the sexiness of Americans.
Mm.
Although his smoking has nothing to do with it, but he was trying to capture that kind of ease and like let's not worry about it. He loved that. He wanted to transport that to women and what women wear,
Yeah,
but in
yeah.
this deluxe satin perfumed world that he lived in, right?
Sure, sure.
But I love that his sense was that he loved American jeans and he loved everything American. He loved that again, that the sexiness of the casual. He loved that.
Playful and yet elegant, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And he did want people to just forget what they looked like when he, but of course they're done up to the nines.
Oh, yeah, of course. And then Karl Lagerfeld. The quote, "The slow, almost invisible evolution of a concept some see as unchanging and immutable, but which in reality changes with fashion, but more slowly. Everyone has his or her classics, but if they don't fit with today's world, they die of indifference. I want to be impossible, even for people I love deeply. I don't want to be real in other people's lives. I want to be an apparition."
Yeah. Carl was an amazing guy too, amazing person to know. He was so generous and so full of ideas and so inspired all the time. He lived for ideas. He really was a sponge. He
Mm,
loved just it was in the air for him, and he could create 100 collections overnight if he wanted to. But he loved that idea that he himself became an apparition or
yeah,
a
yeah.
version of Carl, not a real Carl, but a version of Carl.
The construction, that's so
Yeah,
great. And
we knew him from quite back then, and it's interesting to see all the different Carls that he invented for himself each time. He was his own best fashion creation, I think,
yeah, yeah, I like that concept of like the artist creating the self.
big time.
Um, but one of the things that's so exciting and beautiful about this book is the variation of style and art. You have black and white, you have color, you have a variation of moods. Again, portraits, but then also the kind of surreal abstractions, and it's such a great. Even if you're not a fashion lover per se. It's a beautiful art book, and anybody who loves art would do themselves a favor and pick it up.
Well, I
Um,
appreciate that. Again,
yeah,
what I
of
try to
course.
do with each designer is capture their spirit and their mood,
Yes.
their
Yeah.
soul. And
Yep.
some designers are very graphic and gritty, and some are very smoky and pencily and charcoaly. So it's beautiful to get to express it that way.
And you do such a great job with it. The next one is John Galliano. Quote, "Women are women, and hurrah for that. The problem is with men. I know I shouldn't say this, but they've shrouded and hidden women to hide their own incompetence." What a powerful quote.
It is. I can't top that. That's
Yeah, I know.
cool.
But you captured that sense here with the woman
Yeah, but
holding the
certainly
hidden
his
woman.
design and his aesthetic has always been like a fierce I am here woman who no matter what the situation is or what movie he casts them into, because he really is also a very cinematic designer. He creates an entire universe and a backstory for each woman who's going to interpret his clothing. But
Mm,
he's an amazing person as well. Just so creative and enjoys the powerfulness of femininity
mm.
and explores it in every direction he can.
That's great. I love that, and very suitable for Women's History Month, and you all year round as well, of course. But the timing is great here. This is Rick Owens. I quote, "I just think about how to live with all this negativity. The only answer I see is that in coping with discomfort or suffering, we now have an unprecedented amount of luxury, a level of knowledge we did not have before, and knowledge is power. The world has never known such luxury. If this world is going to go down, I'm going down in heels and shoulder pads, not a cozy sweatsuit."
This is fantastic. Yeah, I love his whole aesthetic and take on the world is very beautiful and again very powerful. It's very dark and very
Yeah,
fierce. Very
yeah,
very. You can hear the drums banging back there in the war call.
yeah.
But I love that aesthetic. That if he was on the Titanic, he would have been dressed to the nines big time. Might as well enjoy it all the way to the end.
Yeah,
And the good thing is it seems to never end, right? We think everything's going to end and collapse and fall apart, but the sad reality is we wake up and we're still here and the world is still here.
one of my favorite bands is the Smiths. I love Morrissey, and he used to one of the lyrics in one of his songs is like, it could all end tomorrow, or it could go on forever,
And
and, and it does.
it
But make
usually
sure
does.
make sure you wear your best gown and tuxedo to the apocalypse, though.
Very much true.
This is Alessandro Michel. The quote is, "Fashion should be genderless." And
That's
I
it.
think
What more can we say,
what
right?
you really capture that
Well, it's
sense of
about
love.
presenting yourself as best you can and being your inner self.
Mhm.
Fashion. I'm always fascinated by the alchemy that of fashion. The transformation fashion allows is incredible. You first change your inner mind, and somehow your outer body obliges for where your mind is at, right? And
Yeah,
clothes give us that freedom to just change. You just change, and you become who you think you are. But it does start here first. That's the beautiful thing about it. Your mind and your heart. Your emotion is connected to your intellect, and therefore your body obliges, and you change clothes.
and it makes me think of Judith Butler's groundbreaking statement that gender is performative.
Very true.
Yeah,
Very, very true.
yeah. Now we have Norma Kamali. Quote, "I guess that in the end, it really doesn't matter who did what first if you really love doing it. But it's nice every once in a while to get recognition for it. It would also be nice if we could make the shopping experience fun again by eliminating the men's department and the women's department and label clothes with sizes for all. Gender fluidity is not a fashion trend, it's a movement." And that
Yeah, Norma's
compliments to,
incredible.
yeah, yeah.
Norma's an incredible creator. In fact, I remember when she first did her beautiful big red down coats that were for women, but I mostly saw them on men. The first
Mhm.
time I ever saw one was when I was must have been 17 or 18 years old. I was with our friend Joey Arias and Klaus Nomi, and
Yeah. Wow.
we went into Barney's when it was still on 17th Street, and there was Gene Pressman selling clothes on the floor, and he sees Klaus and he says, "Oh, Klaus, you have to try this on." And he put on a beautiful, big, giant red duffel coat on
Oh,
Klaus.
wow.
That was from Norma, from the women's department. It was just to see that is so beautiful. That's part of New York culture. That's part of fashion. That's part of style. And uh, like I was saying before, I think everything's connected by a thread.
Yeah, I
It
agree.
wasn't no intention to buy anything that day, but to see him put on this incredible down coat, he looked like some kind of royalty from another planet. You don't know what gender he was.
Well,
And same with, I think, how Norma approaches clothes. It is about the joy of clothing, the joy of dressing, and the joy of transformation, and sometimes hiding, sometimes standing out. It gives you all those liberties.
and mentioning Norma with Klaus Nomi and Joey Arias, you're talking about the icons, the things that are iconic, but also the things that are iconoclastic in a sense as well. Smashing the old and making something new.
Totally.
Yeah.
They all coexist.
Yeah,
And remember, sometimes we're trying to do something classical, but it comes out so wrong that it's iconoclastic and new.
yeah,
So that's the beauty of it. It goes back to the person's own originality and what their inner seed is.
great, so great. Tom Ford, quote, "Fashion is everything: art, music, furniture design, graphic design, hair, makeup, architecture, the way cars look. All those things go together to make a moment in time, and that's what excites me."
Yeah, Tom Ford is fantastic for that too. Again, I think designers, they everyone thinks they're totally super social people or superficial people, but in fact, they're very,
They're
they're
artists. They're
artists. They're
artists.
absorbing
Yeah,
all these different things at once,
yeah.
and their collections is what they've been thinking about all this time. And Tom is a genius about just putting together all these different parts of society and molding it into this luxury thing, right? That we all want to aspire to. I think he's fantastic at that.
Well, in addition to being a designer, he was also the creative director for Gucci, right, and Yves Saint Laurent, and then he became a really great filmmaker. He's made some
Absolutely,
fantastic films. A Single Man, Nocturnal Animals.
absolutely true. And
But
that's
also,
that's that's the proof of what I'm saying. Like again,
yeah,
they're creating a whole atmosphere. The good designers are not just giving you clothing. That's just the tip of the iceberg. But Tom totally proved that by being such a good film director.
oh yeah, and it also makes me think of Frank Lloyd Wright. I read that when he designed a house, he would also want to design the furniture and even the clothing that the inhabitants of that house would wear.
Totally, all the
Yeah,
furniture, the carpeting,
yeah,
everything he made.
yeah,
But
yeah.
not only that, we visited when we were in Phoenix. We visited his famous school, and
Mhm.
we got to meet someone who was actually an old assistant that took us
Oh,
on a tour and
great.
told us what it was like to live there and work there and study there. And he said I think every once a week they had a formal night where everybody had to get wash up and clean up and shave and put on their best clothes, and they had a kind of salon where they would invite patrons and all the fancy folks from museums or anyone who was supporting any project of Mr. Wright's.
Wow.
And they had to socialize at their very best. They had to have cocktails and get dressed. So that goes back to what you're saying. It
Yeah,
is a
yeah.
whole universe. No matter
It's
what, if you're an architect or a writer, you have an aesthetic sense, and you want the world to be as you see it. And if we're the lucky ones, and if we're lucky enough to achieve that, we actually see what the world we're envisioning inside, and other people partake of that. That's a
I,
big gift.
it is, and I think artists are de facto philosophers. They
Absolutely
It's a
true.
big part of it. And now,
Absolutely true.
of course, we come to someone very special.
Mhm.
Your late wife, Isabel Toledo. Yes, I really do talk to my sewing machines, is the quote. And I love
She
that.
loved, she loved industry. She loved the mechanics of. Not only was she like an aesthetic poet, really, with textile and with air, she could create a dress with air. But
Mm,
she loved also machinery. She loved to take things apart and put them
mm,
back together. She was fascinated by how things were made. For her, that was her joy. She always called herself a seamstress more than a
mm,
designer,
mm.
and she understood the difference. But to her, the person making something and working with their hands to make something is the designer, because
Yeah.
in a way, I shouldn't say the designer, but they add such an important ingredient, not
Yeah.
just
A
that they're
personal touch,
designers.
really, right?
Not
Yeah.
only the personal touch, but their way of doing something makes a whole difference. She
Mm,
always said, I could give the same dress cut with the same pattern, same fabric to 10 different seamstresses, and I will get back 10 different dresses.
mm,
So that was
mm.
also part of Isabel's talent. She knew who to give what to
Wow.
get her results,
Wow.
because
Wow.
again, everybody has their own method of making something, even when you're
Sure.
following mass production. Everything is still just slightly different.
Well, yeah, of course.
And she did commune with her with her sewing machines, by the way.
She did. I was going to ask about that. That's great.
Totally.
Can you say
And
more?
when a machine wasn't quite acting to her level, she would sit down with that machine, clean it out, rethread it, look inside it, oil it, do everything herself, and then give it back to her seamstress, because she loved it. She loved that communication, and they really performed for her.
Oh, that's great. That's beautiful. And I love this. This is really one of my favorite illustrations in the book because it has such flow, and it's ethereal, it's dynamic. I love the contrasts of the softness of the pinks with the starkness of the blacks of the sewing machines. It's organic, but it's also mechanical. It's got all these incredible dynamic things happening at once,
Thank
and
you
yet
for
it's so
saying that.
simple.
That means a lot to me. I'm still a shipwreck without her. We met at 13, so we did absolutely everything
Okay.
together. Whether it was allowed or not. If anyone hired me for something, they got Isabel. If anyone hired Isabel, they got me. But we worked closely from the day we met. And I think because I love that you brought up the contrast because our relationship was completely like that. I'm the black heavy sewing machine, and Isabel was this light ethereal poet,
Yeah.
barely touching the ground. She had this incredible ability to be so light, and she enjoyed being light in the sense of she loved disappearing.
Mm.
Where anyone would think in fashion that's rare, you want to have a presence, and she was all about not being there. She really didn't want to be anywhere but in
Wow.
her mind, and in her
Sure.
work. So I
Sure.
think that I love that you caught that about this drawing. I was trying to also express that to me, she was as solid as a rock, but as
Mm.
light as a wisp of air. And that
Yeah.
combination is very rare. It's
Yeah.
a very rare thing. But our
Absolutely.
relationship was like that.
Yeah, I think you aesthetically, you visually really did capture that sensibility.
Thanks for that. I
Yeah,
appreciate it.
very beautifully done, Ruben. Um, Valentino Garavani. Italian fashion is more relaxed, more wearable. French fashion is full of fantasy and extremely feminine. American fashion is in the middle, taking from both.
Exactly, and that was such an easy illustration to me. I saw it right away. America does, because I think we're made out of so many different different nationalities and different. We have such a diverse population from the beginning that I think we do melt. It is a melting pot. We melt all those incredible ingredients of old Europe, of a land that's never existed of anywhere, and invent it in our own new way and wear it in our own new way. I think that's what makes American fashion very unique. It's such a big country, so much different weather, so much different lifestyle, so much diversity in our world.
Yeah.
And the fact, I know consumerism is a bad word, but in fact, it allows you to consume and to invent yourself. You're never caught
Right.
somehow in America. You're never caught by history or by your circumstance. You always have this ability to reinvent yourself from one day to the next, and that's an incredible liberty. That's an
Yeah.
incredible freedom.
It's said that the average American can reinvent themselves 3 or 4 times in the course of their life.
Oh, I think it's every decade at
Probably
least.
even more.
Oh, every decade at least, and
Depending
also
on age.
the mobility we have here. Again, you can live on the West Coast, the East Coast, the middle of America. You go up to Alaska, you can be a Southern person.
And they feel like different countries, different regions feel like different countries oftentimes.
Completely different culture, different food, different way of living, and I think it's an amazing thing to experience. That was always one of me and Isabel's fantasies, was to take a beautiful road trip all across America for a year and just experience every corner. We probably traveled the world more than we did America, unfortunately.
Interesting. Next we have Azzedine Alaia. Did I pronounce that name correctly?
Azzedine Alaia.
Okay. There are no modern clothes. It's the way you wear them, the way you move in them, that makes them modern.
Yeah, Azzedine is an incredible talent. What an incredible man. Again, so generous, so creative, so full of. He was like a bouquet of dynamite of ideas, but always at the service of women, which I loved. He was a lover of history. He also curated museums. He was very heavy into fashion history, and learned so much from it, and then took it to a whole other level. He could have been an incredible educator or teacher. I wish he was still around to be able to do that, because his amount of knowledge about clothing and the technique of clothing, how clothes are made, not just the aesthetic or the taste. Again, normally we take that for granted. You have to have aesthetics and taste, but the technique of how clothes are made and why they were made a certain way through all the different eras
Hmm.
is pretty impressive. Not pretty impressive, amazingly impressive. And he loved the way women moved in his clothes, how they wore his clothes. I think he celebrated the female body so much, infusing it with technology and infusing it with futuristic things. He invented so many techniques too along the way that still recalled history, and that's a unique place to be. To be able to recall what was yet show what can be
What can be.
is just such a beautiful and rare bridge with
Looking back and looking ahead at the same time.
of course, and again with the sensitivity that women will have to wear this. Women want this, and that's a big
Well,
thing.
and speaking of movement, Ruben, you really did capture, and that's another thing I like about the book so much is sometimes as a solitary figure, sometimes as a group of people, but there's always a sense of either stark stillness or really fluid movement, and you get a sense of of his wisdom or his philosophy of what clothes should be able to do in this particular illustration. Honestly,
Thank you for saying
yeah.
that. Yeah, I remember when we met Elia early on, and he had a big show at the Palladium in New York, early '80s. And I remember the set was incredible by our friend John Paul Good. It was just a series of steps from heaven down here, and so the show was just women cascading down that stairway and then going back up it. So you got to see them coming and you got to see them going, but in that movement, not like a street like we are used to today.
Right.
Got to see them, kind of like that kind of
That's
sachet
great.
you do as you have to go down the stairs, and same with aligning your body to go up the stairs. So he always had movement in mind. And
That's what I love about fashion shows too. Is it's so theatrical. It's a performance.
They were kind of more so in the past. Now they've become very kind of robotic and generic. But each era has its moment. Each era has its style of presenting clothes. Because again, I think each designer is. I mean, let's face it. A fashion show is kind of like a statement about the human condition at this point and now, right? And each designer brings their universe to it. But there's also an overriding mood of the moment or of the decade, let's say, or of the era, right? And people kind of align themselves to that. And every so often you get a designer that breaks that mold and breaks out, and little by little everybody else breaks out.
Do you foresee a shift?
Oh yeah, everything's shifted after the pandemic, big time, and the world is falling apart as we know it and remaking itself. So I think, of course, I don't think the costumes for that have arrived yet, but and usually when you go to theater, the sets change very little, but the costumes change often. In this case, I think the set is starting to change before the clothes are. I don't think we've gotten there yet of what are the new clothes. We're still in a kind of super escapist moment of hyper fashion where it's like almost costumey. You'd look at it and say, well, who could wear that? The average person will say, who could wear that? But it's this object of desire of almost escaping our bodies at the moment, right? Things are hyper. And then at the same time, it's just, we're not ready to go back to anything classic or any nostalgic. I think we want to get away from that, but we haven't quite landed on where are we yet.
Well, I look forward to seeing.
No doubt.
I'm curious to see where we go.
Me too.
This one is great. It's one of my favorites too. This is a company's Thea Porter's quote.
Thea's fantastic.
Thea Porter. You call me the mother of the rich hippie look. I believe my abayas made women look both beautiful and comfortable. Whatever else clothes may be about, I believe they must add to the enjoyment of life. A dress is a failure unless it gives a woman added confidence. She must put it on, feel great, and then forget that she is wearing it and get on with her life.
Yeah, I think all good designers are or a certain type of designer are very aware of how should I put it, the effortlessness of looking fantastic, right? You don't want to look fussy and looking in the mirror, making sure everything's on your body and not falling off. You almost want to just be natural. Like, yes, I do look this great, but I don't even think about it. That's the ideal. And Thea was around in the 60s. She kind of brought in this very beautiful gypsy, romantic, a little bit witchy, almost Stevie Nicks kind of like
Nicks,
feeling, which I think is it's so beautiful, so feminine, so poetic, because it's like conjuring up this world out there. The woman who wore Thea Porter is like, she's not of this earth, right? She's a communicator to another planet.
Mystical. There's a sense of mysticism.
Very. They're it's like a coven of secret women that are these beyond beautiful things, that are thinking beautiful thoughts, and You just want to worship them. But I love that she had that sensitivity, the way she
Yeah.
mixed fabrics, the way she only used fabrics that looked great moving and on the body slipping on and off. I think that was very, very, very incredible of her.
Great. Yeah. I wonder if Stevie wore her clothes.
I'm sure she did, and if she couldn't afford it, she wore something like it.
Yeah. This is Stephen Burrows. Quote, clothes should be fun and easy to move in. They're like toys for adults to play with.
Yeah,
That complements the point you were
I love
just
Stephen
making.
Burrows. He's such an incredible colorist, and again, it's such an appreciation of female bodies or human bodies. Period.
Mm.
He made great men's T-shirts, by the way, in the '70s. That if you ever find that, you got to grab them.
Oh, yeah.
But he's just an incredible colorist, an incredible painter, um, and the joy and the happiness he wanted to give people wearing his clothes. It's no secret he came of age during the dance culture of the late '60s and early '70s, which was all about the expression of the body in dance and in movement, and also the joy of having fun as
Yes.
an adult. Why
Right.
would you give up fun after you're 30?
Right.
So
Right.
he
Exactly.
just thought that's what clothing should add to that. They should add to the joy, not only for the wearer, but the person looking at it too.
I agree. I
And
agree.
he was a great dancer, by the way. I think that's why his clothes move so beautifully. He was an incredible dancer. He still is an incredible dancer.
I might need some help with this one. It's Rai or Ray?
Ray
Ray
Kawakubo.
Ray Kawakuba. What is beautiful or meaningful is not always determined by the masses or conventional thought. Sometimes we are moved by beauty and things that break the traditional sense of values. I always try to break the rules with everything because no one really knew strong creation. Because no really knew strong creation ever didn't. I never intended any messages in my work, nor will I do so in the future.
Yeah, Ray's a fantastic abstractionist. She's just such a good. She's really creating art in the sense that some of her clothes are prototypes, almost not meant to be worn.
Hmm.
But it's sure enough her ideas then get squeezed into our average everyday wardrobe. But just her sense of proportion, how she puts things together, and how she addresses the burden of beauty. She, you know what I mean? She doesn't want to trap women into being beautiful in the traditional sense. She wants
Traditional
them to be their own inner beauty, whatever that is. And sometimes
Sure.
it's striking, sometimes it's frightening. But that's an eye opener, and it's a palate cleanser and a mind cleanser. She shows you where we might go, right? She shows you. She explores these strange avenues and tributaries that we might consider dangerous or ugly even. And I think that's so provocative of her. But she does it with
Yeah.
such style, such elegance, and such that incredible I don't want to call it the Zen thing but there is a Japanese Zen thing that is like, wow, it just makes you
Sure.
stop, look and listen, and
Mm.
just absorb it.
Mm.
Even when it looks like a patchwork of 20 different ideas of Dada with poetry and political statements, and it just calms you down into this kind of Zen focus, and she has that big time.
Wow. And I love the way you interpreted it. It almost looks like she's wearing like a Rococo painting or something.
Well, in this case, I was very literal. This is a
Yeah.
Ray Kawakubo design that went down
Yeah.
the runway looking this
Wow.
way. So
Wow.
I couldn't tamper with that. Like I said,
Wow.
some quotes and some designers are just so emblematic that you don't want to touch a thing.
Sure.
And then others leave room for air or for invention.
It's a very smart choice. Heidi Slimani?
Yeah.
Okay, Heidi. The shoes set up the tone and attitude. They change the perception of the way one wears clothes, what we call in French le porte. It is not about height, but the juxtaposition or décollage of the shoes, high or low, with the rest of the proportions.
He's wonderful guy. We met him also when we were very young. Our first time going to Paris to show in Paris our collection, and we met him. He's just an incredible aesthetic guy. Such an eye. He's also a great photographer and a good filmmaker. Talk about creating a universe. But I
Yeah.
love that he talks about it all starts at the feet for me, and then that sets the tone, which is very true. Most people don't think about their foot
Right?
until they walk out the door and slip whatever's near the door, whatever's
Sure.
comfortable. But there's a certain ceremony to first dressing from the feet up. Isabel was big on that too. She let the shoe set the tone for what the rest of the silhouette would do, because it does influence how you're going to walk, how you're going
Sure.
to stand,
Sure.
are you going to walk slow? Do you have to? Can you run? Can you dash? and sometimes wearing the same clothes but changing your footwear makes a completely different statement.
And we see here, it seems as though you're building from the foundation of the foot because it's so exaggerated and
Absolutely. Like I'm looking from the
anchored.
feet and looking up, so
The
your head
perspective, yeah,
and the
yeah.
bottom is what's biggest.
It's almost like a shot from Citizen Kane. You know, it's got
You got it.
it
Exactly
has
right.
that
But they had
quality
to
of
bury the camera down in the basement to get that
yeah,
shot.
yeah.
Absolutely, that's what I was saying.
Greg Tolan, I believe, right? And
Yes,
he
incredible.
invented something new with that.
Yeah, that which was just dig a hole in the ground and bury the camera.
Yeah. Next up, we have Philip Lim. I'm not able to get his quote just yet, but maybe you could talk a little about this while I look for
His was about changing clothes. The fact that during the pandemic, just from going to the bed from the bedroom out to the living room to work on Zoom or something, he didn't have to. He wasn't going anywhere, but he changed his clothes every day. So his collection was expressing the fact that how important it is. Just that the what I was saying before, the alchemy of changing clothes, the alchemy of fashion, the transformation it allows. It starts in here. You get a feeling, but then you can dress that part. You can dress that emotion. So I love that he was commenting on that. Even during the pandemic, when he didn't have to leave the house, he still changed clothes from one room to the other.
And directly to that point, here's the quote. Life in the coronavirus lockdown taught me the importance of routine. I changed clothes, even though my work was in the other room. That's the power of clothing. It allows us to disconnect or connect and brings us more of a sense of purpose and place. When you wear a certain type of clothes, you act and behave differently, and even your posture is different. That is the power of clothes.
Absolutely.
Then we have Tom
And by the way,
Brown.
the pleasure of doing this book too with Mary Lou was that luckily I know most of these designers, so I already know their personality. I know what they like to eat. I know how they like to live. I know what their body language is, how they express themselves. So I think it made the book a joy, but also so easy because I know these people. You know, I know their world. I know their universe. That's the good thing about being old.
There is there,
You've been around a long time, so
but there is a real sense of knowing, yeah, Ruben, that you and Mary Lou both are very intimately acquainted with the subjects. There's a sense of that.
Again,
Yeah.
I don't just love the clothes like the way she does. I think we're both that way. We don't just love the clothes for the clothes. We love their work, but we also love them. You know, we love what their world is. We love that they're creators. We love that they're thinking emotional thoughts and putting out statements in textile. That's a beautiful and rare thing.
It is. And Tom Brown's quote is, I think there's something really refreshing when things don't change too much.
Yeah. For someone who's so radical as Tom, I love that quote. But again, it's that contrary spirit that he has because he's quite classic in his love of things that never change and things that are of quality and things that give you this reassurance about life and about history. Yet he's such a radical person to suggest certain ways of dressing that are really radical. So I love that he blends those two things.
That's great. And then finally, Anthony Vaccarello. As one of Monsieur Saint Laurent's successors, I love his subversive approach to clothes, the dark romanticism with a hint of perversity.
I love that you have YSL twice, right? Because you started with the original Yves Saint Laurent, and then you have one of his designers that happens.
Bookends.
Yeah, exactly, bookends. But I think he's right. He captured. I mean, there's something very Saint Laurent. Saint Laurent created this kind of, how should I put it? She was a subversive French, high level taste. Very, very, very shiny, very gold, very, very, very French. But I love that his aesthetic is such that you could take it to the Barbarella world. You could take it to the Tweety bookworm world. You could take it to the gypsies. You could take it to any kind of cultural mix you want to put in there, and it still comes out like YSL. And I think he did a beautiful job with this collection.
He for sure. Have you or Mary Lou heard back yet from any of the designers who are featured in the book?
I heard back from quite a few of them. Of course, everybody loves the book because it's like being in a family album. It's like being in a beautiful family album or a high school album where you've all reached this other world, and that's a nice place to be. I've heard and sensed a lot from them that there's a sense of celebration about it. Like, yes, fashion exists, and fashion is an important thing as food and as architecture and as art. It's valid. It's a valid way to address your emotion and to let your spirit grow. It's an uplifter.
Do you have a favorite quote? from the book?
Geez, I don't. You know what? I don't. I love them all, and I
Yeah.
love all the artwork. All like I said, it was a joy to be in that world for a long time. I wish we were already working on volume 2, 3, and 4, because it's just a pleasure to visit each designer's way of thinking. Um, um, when I go to draw somebody's work, in other words, I took the quote into account, but I also, of course, there's like the memories all come back of the first shows you saw of theirs, and how you met them, and with who, and where you were, what the circumstance was. All that goes into my drawing. Not that anybody could tell, but it's in here. I try to capture that emotion. So yeah, I love them all. It's like I can't take one
You
piece
can't say.
out.
Sure, I get it. And then, of course, your collaborator.
Mary
Mary,
Lou, I can't
Mary
say
Lou
enough
Luther.
about that angel. She's an amazing. She really is.
You drew her so beautifully. It's such a mesmerizing image.
Well, she's a mesmerizing person to me.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to you and to your public at the Queen's Library that she's not here, because she has such a beautiful voice. I love hearing Mary Lou. She should have a podcast. I've told her. She's not sure what it is, and neither am I. But I feel like it's about sound. She's got such a beautiful voice. She could just recite the telephone book for me, or just read the weather. She's like a chic weather reporter, a forecaster, because she tells you things in a very orderly, matter-of-fact way, and can really predict what the weather's going to be like. But she tells it to you in such a reassuring and beautiful, sincere voice. I don't know. There's some beautiful thing about her voice.
A real great and powerful communicator, sounds
Big
like.
time.
And to
And a
that
good
point,
writer.
and a good writer. And that was a shameless segue into the next question, which is, it is afterward, in your book, designer Rick Owens said that fashion is about communication. So I asked Mary Lou last week to speak to that sentiment, and she said, quote, "Communication implies an exchange of ideas. Instead of preaching to the choir, as in shows for buyers and press, designers need to talk directly to their customers." And Bespoke speaks to this. What are your thoughts about Owen's statement and also Mary Lou's answer?
Well, first of all, art to me is communication. And that's why,
Yes.
as artists, and I take this very seriously, and so did Isabel. We both took this very seriously. The art you put out into the world, whatever that is, it's a dress, if it's a painting, if it's a theater piece, the art you put out into the world, you're responsible. So you have a sense of responsibility about putting out a good message, And what I mean about good is subjective, but by that, what I mean about good is that it has to be sincere to you, and you have to have a message to say. If not, don't say anything, right?
Right. Yep.
There's too much already. We have
Yep.
too much. We don't need more. So whatever you put out has to be so sincere, and it has to be you. And I think artists are great communicators, and they're also very brave, because we have to open up, and since it is your sincere thought, you could be open to mockery, you could open to critique, but as long as it's sincere to you, you're strong enough to stand behind that, right? So
Yes.
so all art is, to me, communication, and I tell that to we work a lot with young students, and so does Mary Lou. It's very important for young people to understand that it's not just for the act of creating. It's like, what are you creating, right?
What
You
are
have
you
to have a
what are you
sense
saying? Yeah, and why?
of
What are you saying and why?
and you have to
Yeah.
remember, it is communication.
Yeah.
If we're artists, we're lucky enough to have an audience that's going to receive our messages. So, man, you better have those. You better mean those messages have to mean something to you, and they have to have nutrition in it, right? Nutrition for the soul. You're feeding people, so you have to make them grow. You have to make them or allow them to grow.
Yeah, I agree with this. And I just interviewed Terry Roach, the folk musician Terry Roach, a couple of weeks ago, and she said, "I'm in a period now where I'm just waiting." She said, "I don't have anything specific that I need to say yet, so I'm just waiting and letting thoughts and feelings and ideas pass through me
Is
until
this
I'm
from
able."
the Roach sisters?
Yeah, yeah,
Oh, I love the
yeah,
Roach sisters.
yeah,
They're
yeah.
amazing.
I interviewed her about a month ago. I'll send you the link. Yeah,
They're amazing. I was first introduced to their music when I was a kid, well, not a kid, but it was almost my first job at Unique Clothing Warehouse, and there was a Roach album of the sisters there in 1977 or 78,
yeah, yeah.
and the cover was fantastic. They're just the way they looked, even was
very,
fantastic. The
very
music,
soulful.
completely and sincere, and again, so American. I guess from not being an American, I'm in love with America still. Being from Cuba, to me, all American things are still exotic. Hot dogs,
Of course,
hamburgers, a
I get
drive-in,
it.
anything like
Sure,
that
sure.
blows my mind.
I
But
get that.
Isabel felt the same way. There was some, always before a collection, people interview her and say, "What was your theme or what was your inspiration?" And I remember her first clearly saying to Amy Spindler at the New York Times, "I have no inspiration. The work itself was the inspiration. I have no
Mm.
inspiration this year," because she was very truthful about that. If it wasn't happening, it wasn't happening. If there was no other backstory, if it was just
That's
about
honest. Yeah, I
reading
love how
story,
honest that is. Yeah,
that's the story.
that's great.
So
And sometimes that's enough. You know, the art for art's sake, you know, is also nutritious.
well, art
If
speaks
you
for you.
yeah,
Art
art
does the
speaks for
speaking
itself.
for you.
Yeah,
Isabel
yeah.
is big on that too. Let the art do the talking. I don't need to talk. I don't need to explain it. Just let the art move people if it does.
Like a Rorschach almost, because everybody will project different things, different
Absolutely
personal
true.
subjectivities onto it.
And when there's content in that Rorschach, then it's got it. You know.
I agree. Eve, you could take the images down now. Thank you so much. Ruben, you're also a designer for Penguin Classics Deluxe Editions, which is, as a writer, very exciting to me. You've illustrated the dust jackets for Jane Eyre, Dracula, Wuthering Heights, The Scarlet Letter, The Picture of Dorian Gray. How do you enjoy interpreting classic literature visually, and how do you approach it?
God, I love it so much. Just sad that it's limited to a cover. To me, they would
Mm,
all be illustrated novels because
yeah.
I want to draw every scene. I love reading. First of all, we wherever whatever studio we've ever been in, we always have 4 floors of libraries, just
Wow.
about in every
Great.
floor. I
Great.
love books. I love reading. Isabel did too. We also inherited a lot of wonderful libraries from friends who passed on, like Bill Cunningham and Richard Martin
Mm,
from the Met,
mm.
and
Yeah.
just amazing people who knew we loved books and cherished them. Our friend Juan Ramos, Antonio Lopez. The but writing, Isabel always said that writers were a fashion designer's best friend because they can interpret a
Yeah.
collection, put it down into words that then can people can relate not just to the image. They can now they could read about what they're looking at. That's a
Right.
very important thing.
Yeah.
In
Right.
a way, fashion is designers invent letters. They invent letters that are for a language that is not spoken, but we
Mm.
can all relate to the visual. We're all reading their story, and I think illustrating the Penguin Classics to me is like I said, it's the bad part is I have to limit it to one
Just the cover.
one image. I want to draw the whole thing because I get carried away by the author, by the story, by the words and how they're crafted, how they're put together, how they express themselves. It's so nourishing,
Mm.
So to take the time to read a book is so good for your soul.
Yeah.
It triggers my imagination.
Well,
It
as
only
a
helps me do the cover, but then I
yeah,
go off and do a whole other series of watercolors and drawings and paintings because I'm inspired by what I read.
Ruben, as a writer who works for a library, thank you for saying all of that.
Oh,
We
well,
we very much appreciate it.
listen, I would live in a library. I
Um,
would intern at the Queen's Library if they'll have me.
come on board, absolutely.
A
And
pleasure.
I should tell all the viewers that we're going to start taking questions for Ruben shortly, so please start sending them in. I still have a few more of my own while we wait. Um, we spoke so much about inspiration, Ruben, during the past hour. Who are some artists, aside from perhaps fashion designers, or you could include them, who inspire you?
Jeez, I'm inspired by every artist I know. I'm
That's
inspired by because again, the
great.
artists, whether you want to or not, you're sharing ideas. They're just sparks that fly out of you, and
Mm,
they're nutritious. We were lucky enough to uh, come into New York at such a young age and meet incredible people like Andy Warhol and Basquiat and Kenny Sharp and Jesus, it's just endless. Keith
yeah,
Haring.
right.
Um, and designers like Halston and uh, people like Liza Minnelli, and it's just kind of endless. It
And
boggles your mind the people you met as a kid,
right.
and just not even in a social scene, just like working and doing your
Yeah,
thing. You bumped
yeah,
into people.
it's great.
I forget bumping into Jackie Onassis
Yeah.
and Yoko Ono and people like this just on the street, and they would smile at you, and you might have a conversation for a minute. That's and not in a fan way, but in an artist
Sure.
way.
Yeah, yeah. You're
That's very very
relating to them as professionals and fellow
absolutely.
artists. Yeah.
And there's just something that's what society is about. That's what cities are about, right? That you don't plan these things; they just happen.
Yeah.
The way we're
That's
having a
great.
conversation now, and hopefully we meet people we don't know on the internet.
Yeah,
It's a
absolutely.
beautiful, beautiful accident. I love that chaos. But
It's
yeah, I'm
spontaneity.
inspired by. I mean, people like Twyla Tharp, who's an incredible choreographer and artist in her own right, in many ways, even visually. She maps out all her dances, and they're
Mm,
like beautiful drawings.
that's
Um,
great.
I don't think people really understand. Sometimes, if you're not an artist, you don't understand how wide a net you live in. It's not just
Oh,
if we're lucky enough, we get known for doing something, right? Or one thing. But there's a whole other universe behind every artist, and that's so enriching.
We're all kind of Renaissance people on some level.
Yeah, and I think everyone is. Everyone
Mhm.
is a creator.
Mhm.
If when we're lucky enough to work in it, that's even better. But we are all creative in our own world. That's an important fact.
A bunch of questions and statements have come in, Ruben. I'm going to read a few. So Ray Kawakuba is my very favorite, writes Mimi Jackson. Here's a question. Love your illustrations, Ruben. Can you tell us how you got started? Did you go to art school in Cuba? What advice would you give a young art student getting started today?
Don't wait. Just start doing your thing. I had no real training. Like I said, I met Isabel when I was 13 in art class, and I failed that art class in high school. So I flunked art all the time. But I did go to School of Visual Arts for one semester. I couldn't afford anything else other than that, so I quit after one semester. That's all I could afford, and then it ended up taking 10 years to pay that back, that loan. But that was the summer I met Joey Arias and Klaus Nomi and F. Fiorucci and Andy Warhol and Keith Haring and these incredible cavalcade of people. So real life could not compete with school. Now I would love to go back to school, believe it or not, because I didn't learn properly to do anything. I just mumbled my way through everything and stumbled into everything. The same way Isabel didn't start out to be a fashion designer either. We both found our way, or our work found us, if you know what I mean. We were doing 1,000 different things, and then suddenly you are obsessed with one thing, and luckily people notice that and want more of it. But yeah, my advice to the students is always don't wait. Just start doing. Don't be a perfectionist. All your big mistakes are going to turn into beautiful swans. All your ugly ducklings absolutely
beautiful swans.
But the only way there is to work through it. So that's where the bravery of an artist come in. You have to live with yourself while you're hating what you're doing sometimes, or while you think it's insignificant. Just keep going, and you get to where you need to be.
Yep, I agree with that wholeheartedly.
Oh, but I also do think
yep.
For young students, you have to surround yourself with a nourishing environment.
Mm-hmm.
You can't be around toxic situations, toxic people. You have to. Isabel and I always kept our studio was 4 floors in Tin Pan Alley, and we always kept good people around us. By that I mean the staff and every intern we took. You have to allow a nurturing space that you can make mistakes in, right? Where that's where you feel freedom to just be, and that's how you get to be who you are, right? So you don't be a perfectionist, don't be your own worst critic. Just do
the work, right?
Just do.
Here's another question. I understand you are a fan of libraries, Ruben. Why is that? What message do you have to say to people and organizations trying to ban books in libraries today?
Oh, geez, that is just so I can't believe we're even. I mean, we have to take this seriously, but I can't believe this is a fact. During my time, I just never thought America would slip into that world. You know what I mean?
Staggering.
Remember, I come from Cuba, a communist country where things were restricted, and so you come to this place where there's complete freedom of expression. And also think of the year Isabel and I came in, 68, 69. You had the hippies revolution. You had women's rights just starting. You had gay rights and Black Power, and just to think that we're limiting our human growth is so bizarre. But I think it's a phase we're going through, and we have to we have to fight for that freedom to go forward. But it is a phase we're going through that I think, because America, let's be truthful. America is like a cannon of ideas. We always invent the future before the rest of the world is ready for it, even before we're ready for it. Yep. So it's a tide, I understand the tide goes in like a crashing wave and then pulls back out. So we're in a pull back out moment.
And everything is sort of cyclical, right? History keeps repeating itself. So we'll come out of it. It's just we have to weather it in the meantime.
Yeah, I mean, every time we get all these advances, then we pull back big time. So it's a natural swing. So I don't think we should be completely afraid of it, but be vigilant of it and be aware of it and live your truth. You know what I mean? That's the only way forward. Live who you are. Live your truth sincerely, and believe me, you will win. That kind of freedom will win.
Okay. Well, we are going.
To me, but by the way, I grew up in libraries because I was a bad student and detention was in the library. So I was thrilled to have detention and had to go sit.
To get locked in with all the books, right?
That was my whole, and that opened up the whole world to me. That's how I learned about filmmakers, Antonioni, Fellini, Visconti. That's how I learned about advertising. Our friend George Lois at Esquire. I learned about advertising. I learned about art. I learned about fine art, music, film, choreography, Broadway, everything that's important to me. I learned there in the library in detention when I was 13 and 14 and 15 years old. And
So
then I
like,
read the book, my first book. I started my library with the discard box at the libraries, old books that they didn't want anymore and sold for 25 cents.
yeah,
Those were the gems. So
yeah,
I have
yeah.
beautiful old books that nobody wanted anymore.
It sounds like it's sort of like a wonderful punishment that really woke you up.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, I think when you're on your road as an artist, you could do no wrong. Even when you do
Yep.
wrong, you could do no wrong.
I look forward to like being stuck by myself so that I can work, Um, did you know Antonio Lopez is another question.
No, I only knew Juan Ramos. Unfortunately, we met Antonio very briefly, but I can't say we knew him. New York knew him the way New York knows certain personalities. Antonio was that kind of personality. When you knew, we met Antonio at Fiorucci.
Mhm.
Juan Ramos, his incredible partner, creative partner, became a very, very good friend of ours after Antonio passed away. But we met Antonio first, and we didn't meet Juan, but we met Antonio at Fiorucci back then in 1977 or 78. I think they were art directors of Fiorucci, one of the first ones. I know they designed the opening of Studio 54
Hmm.
with Fiorucci, paraphernalia, and they designed half of it themselves. But the little I got to know of Antonio without officially knowing him blew me away. Just the way what he was wearing, how he associated with people. He was a very open and super creative person that just allows other people to open up too. There's some people who have that talent. And then we met him again once in a subway of all places, going down downtown from 59th Street. And again, it was that kind of like you just recognize each other. You know what I mean? And people who are so giving that without saying much, they give you everything, and
Yeah.
you get that. You really get that.
It's an aura, right? And
Yeah,
it's
Anna
generous.
Piaggi was this other kind of person that incredible Italian stylist Anna Piaggi. I don't know if you know Anna; she's gotten out too. Worked for Vanity with Antonio, but also this kind of person that just opened up to you immediately and gave you their whole world in like 5 sentences. And then Juan Ramos, I can't say enough of. He was just such a creative genius. Totally one of the most inspiring people Isabel and I ever met. Such an inspired person, and one of these people who builds bridges to a time you didn't live and a time you didn't know, but he did, and he was that open and giving about his experience that you felt like you lived it. You lived that world.
Speaking of outsized personalities and iconic figures, here's another question. I understand you had known Andy Warhol, who started out as a commercial illustrator. Can you share a memory or two about Warhol?
I could share a million. Andy was, again, he was a very mythical, also like Carl, I want to be an apparition, not a real person, but his real personness would leak out without him knowing it. When he first looked at my artwork, he was one of the reasons why I started doing my art, because Joey Arias, we got lost on a trip to go to a museum. It was pouring rain and we had to jump into Fiorucci. We didn't know what it was. We just went in a store to keep dry. And that's where I met Joey, and I had a portfolio under my arm, and he whips it open from under my arm and says, "What do you have in there?" And he starts looking through, and there were hand-painted black and white photographs I had done of Isabel, hand-painted with food dyes. So he showed them to Andy, and Andy said, "Oh, these are great. You should do them bigger," because they were just small postcards. He said, "You should do exactly what you're doing now, just do it gigantic," which is really great advice.
Yeah.
Because it was about scale. When you're starting out, first of all, as a poor artist, you can't afford that. You can only afford this if you're lucky, right?
Yeah.
But so he showed them to the person that sold postcards at Fiorucci. Fiorucci had a beautiful concession stand that sold artist postcards in the middle of the store. So can you imagine? You can buy postcards from artists.
That's
and they were just
fantastic.
regular price, no big deal. And so he showed them to this woman who ran that store, Sweet Pea, and she ended up ordering 12 of these, 24 of those, 36 of those. So that was my first art job. I ran back to my high school in West New York, New Jersey, and started cranking out these postcards I would deliver once a week to Fiorucci. So yeah, Andy was a very, very giving person, and also full of so much conceptual ideas that the 3 words that he would tell you were inspiration enough for your lifetime.
And instrumental on some level, perhaps with regard to the start of your career. What
Big
year was
time.
that, Ruben?
In
What
many
year?
ways, but also as a like the person who asked the question, good question, because yes, he started out as a commercial artist. That's why I always say to kids, if you're going to be an artist, it's okay, just start, even if it's doing drawings for a magazine or comic books or whatever it is you're going to do. Don't be afraid of commerce. The word commerce is it's gotten a bad rap, but listen, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the commercial world.
Sure,
I
sure.
didn't have an easy time entering the fine art world. That's why I went full on into commercial work, and luckily it paid my way, and it made me become who I became, but it also paid my rent and paid for food. There's something very and Andy told me that there's something very how should I say, honest about commercial, because you want this drawing, you pay this much, and I have to hand it this, but everything's very crystal clear. I have a deadline, I have a price, and I have to deliver. And then the beauty of it is you see your work printed, or you see it go out into the public, like we were talking about Rick Owens' quote about being a communicator. You become a communicator, and that's a beautiful power, but a beautiful responsibility too, to
Yes.
have your
Yeah.
artwork go out into the world. So I
Yeah.
love that Andy taught me that. He taught me that to be a real artist is to have total freedom to do what you're interested in, even if it's insignificant. And
Hmm.
that's a big deal, even if it's just designing a menu or an ad for a store or doing a window the way he did at Fiorucci. I saw his philosophy in action.
And having the freedom. Yeah.
Total
Having
freedom to
having
do
the
what you
liberty.
want, from a,
Yeah.
from a
The
museum
license.
show or a portraiture to just to designing his magazine.
It's deeply satisfying as an artist or a writer to have, to be able to take poetic license, and to have creative freedom.
Big time.
Here's another statement by Mimi. Thank you for letting us know that quitting and failure can happen on the road to success.
Oh, it's essential.
It's
Totally
essential.
essential. And you know what? The quitting part is very important too. There's sometimes where something's just not happening, but if you're sincere with yourself, you let it go and you say, you know what? It's just not happening.
Mhm.
Again, I'm lucky enough to have the facility to work fast. So if I have 5 things going and 2 of them want to quit and they just don't hold my interest anymore, then I understand they're not ready for prime time, and I go
Yep.
and I focus on the ones that are, especially when there's a deadline. But sure enough, those that die in front of you will come back to life. Absolutely.
Oh,
Never
oh,
throw out the work. Never throw out,
I, I know it. I hear you. I mean,
right?
you go through so many, as a writer, even you go through so many drafts before you're happy with the project. Sometimes you bang out a first draft in 3 months, and then you spend 7 years revising it 45 times until you're happy with it.
Beautiful, but never kill the seed, right? The
But
seed,
never kill the
the
seed. The
seed of
end, it's
idea
always
is
there.
very
Yep.
important. Never
Yep.
kill the seed.
Yep. So I just want to say, to buy a copy of Bespoke, and here it is, please check out the link in the chat to Rizzoli. It is, of course, available where books are sold, but check out Rizzoli's website in the chat section of this presentation, and do yourself a favor and buy Bespoke. If you love art, if you love fashion, if you love philosophy, it offers all of it. Ruben, thank you so much for this hour. We
Hey, did we
really,
talk enough about Mary Lou? This is her book. I want her to get,
yeah, I think we
this is
did.
her
Yeah,
star treatment.
I think so. I think so. Is there anything else you wanted to say about her, or?
Uh, just that she's such a fearless woman, in the
Mhm.
kindest way. She really wants to talk about communication again. She wants to communicate with as many people as possible and tell them about the great things that she discovers.
Mm.
That's a rare and beautiful gift. She's very generous that way. I think the book shows that, and how she relates to creators, designers, artists, but as a human person, on a human level. And I think that's why she sees the greatness of what they do, because she sees the greatness of their soul,
Mm.
and when she writes, she's writing what's not there. She's writing what's in here and what's in here. I think that's what makes her unique in fashion journalism.
Well, that's a really beautiful and profound tribute, and I'm sure she'll appreciate that. And
She deserves that, and 2,000 times more.
and perhaps in the future we could have another program with the three of us,
Oh, that would be a
make sure.
pleasure. And
Yeah.
I want to talk more about your writing too, about words, because I do love books. I love writing. I try to incorporate words into my art as much as possible. Not so much in the commercial work, but in my fine art, because words are, in fact, when Isabel and I worked with students, fashion students, design students, anybody, we do a writing session where they write what they want to express, but not in a doesn't have to make sense even, but we want them to use words, and because words evoke emotion, words are symbols, and they have a meaning, but they have
Sure.
another meaning too, and another
Sure.
and another, and it's how you string everything together.
Even in psychology, there's something called neuro-linguistic programming, where you speak the thoughts or the feelings you want to eventually start to feel or
I love
believe.
that.
Yeah.
I
So
love
yeah,
that. By the way,
absolutely.
Isabel was big on talking languages that didn't exist. She just sought to like verbalize sounds, and they would sound like a language. That always blew my mind.
Ah, that's
She
really
wasn't a big
inventive.
speaker. She didn't like to talk much. She doesn't. In fact, we're doing a documentary on Isabel, and it's hard to find clips
Mm.
of her talking because it's always me who does the talking. That was my job. But it's hard to. She didn't like to talk a lot, but
I'm so
she was very playful about sounds.
Yeah, I mean, I think that probably also informed her creativity and her creative process. And I'm really thrilled to hear that you're working on this documentary. Do you have a timeline, or do you know when
No,
it will?
our director is the amazing Chiara Clemente, who's I'm sure you know her dad's work is Francesco Clemente, and her mom is
Yeah.
Alba Clemente.
Wow.
They're both
Wow.
incredible artists, and she's an incredible filmmaker. She's done a lot of documentaries on artists, especially female artists, and just Chiara's vision of how to tell a story is so poetic and ethereal and not structured in the normal way, yet it tells such a complete story. I think she's the perfect director for doing Isabel. But yeah, I think it should be happening in the next year.
Okay, good. We'll look forward to that, and we'll have all of you on when it's ready to screen, and we'll
It's
have
a
a
deal.
Culture
What a
Connection
pleasure.
program dedicated to that.
And
Are
I
you
want to say a
keep?
little writing on it when we send it to you.
Oh, please, by all
That
means,
pleasure.
I would be honored. Um, very quickly, I wanted to ask you, what are you in charge of Isabel's line right now? What's the
No,
life of?
I stopped production period after
Okay,
Isabel passed. I could never do
okay,
what she did, even though we did everything together. I could never
mm,
do what she did the same way she said I could never do what you do. We both had very distinct and different talents and very
sure.
different aesthetics. That's why I think that friction is what created our body of work and made it more
Mm,
interesting and more three-dimensional because we didn't think alike. You know, we
mm,
had we completely different tastes and aesthetic, but that weaving
yeah,
together of those two elements made what we both do richer. But yeah, I could never do what she did. And also the pandemic hit. So our staff, I had to let our staff go, and they were ready to retire anyway. They were all
mhm,
grandmothers, and so a lot of them went back to their countries to bring up their grandkids. I did intend to keep the studio open because we did also some Broadway work and theater work. So there's always people always need to have those costumes remade. But again, I had to unfortunately not let go of our staff, and it's like
mm,
it broke my heart because we only had always 10 or 12 people. My father was our tailor for years until
mm,
he passed away. So it was almost when Isabel passed, it was almost the end of that chapter. I could feel it, you know. And then COVID hit a couple of months later. So that's it. It's I feel like a shipwreck 3 years later, and I'm still on
mm.
a stranded island called Manhattan. But it's a whole other world that I'm seeing coming, and I'm optimistic for that world. I'm excited to see, especially the next generation, build it and see what kind of world we want to live in.
That's a very optimistic, hopeful take, Ruben.
That's hard.
That's great. That's work, right? It takes work. Thank you again, once again, for this so much,
My
and
pleasure.
thank you everyone for joining. Yes, Mimi, you must buy the book. It's fantastic. You'll be happy you did. Everyone, have a good weekend. Thank you so much. Take